In order to prevent the war from happening, there are two things we need to do. One is for Taiwan to be able to defend itself, and this is a good deterrence. And the second is for other countries to be prepared at the same time, show support to Taiwan. And we are trying to get ourselves prepared. We are arming ourselves. We are making more investment. We are training ourselves. And the training process has been intensifying. And this is a good deterrence against China. And we are also seeing major countries showing support for Taiwan. And this is another good deterrence against China.
Xi Jinping has said that he wants the Chinese military to be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027. That's just 4 years away. I wonder how seriously you take these quite near at hand timescales for some kind of conflict, because the Americans also seem to take them seriously.
We are taking the Chinese military threat very seriously, and that is the reason why we make more investment in our own defense capabilities. But we have not been focusing on one timeline only. For example, a lot of people are talking about 2025. Some people talk about 2027. Some people talk about 2035, and etc. We take all kinds of assessment in a very serious way, and what we want to be prepared for is no matter when the Chinese are going to launch its military attack against Taiwan, we are prepared. But I think 2027 is a year that we need to be serious about. First is that China have already announced that it's going to be militarily ready by year 2027. And that is also going to be the year that Xi Jinping will go into his fourth term. And if Xi Jinping is not able to tell the Chinese people that he has accomplished anything in the first, second, and the third term, he might want to initiate a crisis against Taiwan to show to the Chinese people that he has the desire and ability and taking actions against Taiwan for China's unification. So this is what we are looking at.
So to be very, very clear about it, Mr. Wu, you are prepared for war in 4 years' time?
I say that we need to be prepared for any time that China wants to mount an attack against Taiwan. And if we look at all the timelines, they all have their validity in their discussions. And to me personally, 2027 seems to be a year that we need to pay more attention to for the reason that China has already announced that it's going to be military ready. And at the same time, Xi Jinping will also go into his fourth term. And I think the worst type of situation that we have been looking at is looking at the Chinese aggression from a classical analysis on authoritarianism. If they have domestic problems, they might create external crisis to divert the domestic attention. And if you look at the Chinese economy, it's slowing down and people are not happy. The real estate is something like melting down. The financial system or the financial situation has not been good, and people have been discontent after the long period of COVID lockdowns. So this is creating domestic pressure, and we are concerned that China may want to initiate a crisis to divert the domestic attention. And Taiwan is so conveniently located right next to China, and therefore we have to be concerned. And because of that, Taiwan government has been doubly prudent in handling our relations with China to prevent crisis from happening.
And that, of course, presents lots of issues for other countries, friendly countries like Britain. The British Foreign Minister, James Cleverly, said recently it was very important that Britain did not pull the shutters down on China and that he had no intention of throwing away what influence I have. And he said this, he said, "I keep being asked to sum up the nature of the relationship in one word. Are they competition? Are they a threat? Are they a challenge? Are they an opportunity?" If you were talking to Mr. Cleverly, which word would you choose?
I would say that we need to look at it in a very comprehensive way. Of course, the threat is there, might not be threatening the UK directly, but the Chinese military threat or its expansionism in this area is so apparent. And at the same time, China is also challenging our values when they expand, when they exercise their influences either in the Pacific or in the Indian Ocean, or in Africa. Our value, freedom, democracy, and the protection of human rights is at lines, and they are expanding at our cost. So we need to look at this. And at the same time, even though the UK is looking at China as an economic opportunity in the long run, we agree to it. But at the same time, we also need to look at the economic pipeline that Taiwan is situated in. And if Taiwan is under Chinese attack and the supply line or computer chips is disrupted, I'm sure the UK is going to be impacted in a very serious manner. And therefore, we need to look at it comprehensive way, and for the UK, Taiwan, and other countries to come together and work together to deal with the situation.
Can I ask you about one very likely Chinese strategy with Taiwan, which is to slowly cut Taiwan off? There was a blockade of airspace not that long ago north of Taiwan, and the idea is that they'll make it harder and harder to travel to Taiwan and slowly strangle you economically. Do you have plans to deal with this problem?
Yes, and what you say is something that we have been encountering. For example, in the military exercises in August last year, they announced several areas as no-fly zone to test their missiles. And just a couple of weeks ago, they also announced that they're going to have a major military exercises around Taiwan. And immediately after that, they have announced another no-fly zone at a very busy international flight route. And with that kind of announcement, a lot of countries felt the pinch, and therefore they put pressure on China to make a change of it. And this kind of situation is something that we are very concerned about. And it's not only the international flight, it's also energy that we care about. It is also our communication with other countries, and it is also our relations with other countries. And China has been putting a lot of pressure on all this.
Mr. Wu, let me finish by asking about this. It was quite clear to a lot of people a long time before Russia invaded Ukraine that it was likely that that was going to happen. The Russians talked about it, and somehow the rest of the world ignored that or pushed it to one side. Similarly, the Chinese talk endlessly about attacking your country, Taiwan. What is your message, therefore, to British people listening to this, but also to the British government, who is wondering whether they need to change policy on Taiwan?
Well, the UK government has its integrated policy review with an Indo-Pacific tilt. And in the new review, it's mentioned very clearly, not just the war in Ukraine, but also in the Indo-Pacific. And all these kinds of views highlighted the UK government's attention to the possible scenarios in the Indo-Pacific. And if we go back to the war in Ukraine, we did not stop Russia from taking over Crimea. And the Russians were emboldened to go ahead and initiate a war against Ukraine. And the same kind of analogy can be drawn on the Indo-Pacific. We did not stop China from imposing national security law in Hong Kong. And people were asking, what is going to be the next? Is Taiwan going to be the next? Now Taiwan is feeling all this pressure. And if Taiwan is being taken by China, we can imagine that the waters within the first island chain, whether it's East China Sea or Taiwan Strait or South China Sea, I think it's all going to fall under China's influence or China's control. And it's going to be a danger for the countries in this region. And if we do not stop the authoritarianism from expanding any further, I think China has an ambition over the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and Africa. And therefore, the lesson is that we need to stop the authoritarianism from expanding further. We made a mistake in not stopping Russia from attacking Ukraine. And I hope the like-minded partners, the UK included, can stop China from initiating any war against Taiwan.